Please don't say. No, you do that. All right, so good morning, everyone. We are here from DUX, Driverless Urban Car System. My name is Evan Cruz.
I'm Jessica Cowell.
I'm Alex Laval.
So yeah, our advisors for this project are Dr. Farzad Ahmad Kanlu. We have our TA, Joseph Bell, and it's under Kennedy. So this is a collaborative capstone project with Peking University in Beijing and the University of Toronto. So I know it's sort of the dean's project since he went and taught in Peking over the last summer and sort of worked with them and saw a lot of projects they were doing and decided that they wanted to work on one with us. So we got invited to work on this project throughout the year. So the project really got started because of a lot of different reasons, mostly in China. Things like traffic congestion, inefficiencies, and pollution are really huge issues. When we were there, we saw how much of a problem it was. Just to be able to breathe and to see, and I guess the air was fairly clear for their standards. So it's a very big issue. So the solution that we came up with for this problem is very small, efficient vehicles that are really meant to be used for 1 to 2 people. And then, so our team is focusing on implementing that whole system here in the United States, while the Chinese team is working on it in China, and Canada's working on it for the rest of North America. So what we focused on for winter quarter was the optimal strategy implementation. So we've been working on a path optimization program in MATLAB to be able to take up to many thousands of vehicles in a city grid that we've built and say, from A to B, what's the most optimal path and how to plot that, and also put vehicles into vehicle trains to raise efficiency. So we've done a lot of simulations. We have an entire city that we've built with the ability, as I said, to plot more than 10,000 vehicles and put them all together into trains. So our timeline. So we worked on, we actually visited Beijing back in fall quarter, met with the teams there, had a large scale presentation, and really got to meet up and talk with everyone else and get focused on the project and where we're all going. So this quarter we've been working on a full, roughly 15 to 20 page design review paper in the first iteration of our program. Like I said, it's all the MATLAB coding trying to do path optimization. So for spring, we'll be completing a secondary paper and running through the program again, looking through any bugs, making sure it runs really well, and then be later sending that code to PKU in Toronto. The Toronto team is actually working on implementing our program onto small RC cars, and we'll be showing how those move as vehicle trains at their design review in early April. So our project is set to finish when Toronto PKU finish at the end of April.
So my focus has primarily been on vehicle efficiency, mostly focusing on forming vehicle trains as our primary method of increasing efficiency. So what we've looked at doing is trying to figure out if vehicle trains are more efficient. Some of the things I've looked at are forming small following distances using technology such as radar mounted in bumpers, having constant communication between all vehicles so they slow down and speed up as a unit, and forming this electronic linkage in between these vehicles so that they kind of form one cohesive unit instead of having to separate cars following each other. Some of the sectors that I've been looking at aerodynamic efficiency is researching in motorsport drafting, although most of that research tends to be on 2 vehicles only, but there is a lot of research done there because that's a big element of their drag. High-speed trains is also another area that we've been really focusing on because obviously that's, again, a big deal to them. So we can look at aerodynamic nose shapes and they can actually model what the drag is on each individual car. So it's really easy for us to take that data, import it in, and figure out what would work on cars. And then transport trucks also have a lot of aerodynamic research done on just decreasing drag in general in order to increase the efficiency. So we've been using Autodesk Flow Design as just our preliminary method of checking drag. So we modeled the difference between 1, 3, and 12 cars. And these were just some brief pictures that I took during our flow design process. And we've also been working with our professor on nailing down actual methods to reduce drag for longer trains. So some of the benefits of having the increased efficiency, obviously, is the emissions reduction, especially in places, I guess China in particular, where that is like their big focus right now. So things that we've been focusing on are what what actually would be reduced? Let's say every car in the U.S. now is electric, but obviously now we need more power production. So it's kind of an offset. So we need to research that aspect as well. Meeting that increased electrical demand, even on the grid, things like that need to be upgraded in order to support such a large draw. And redesigning a conventional vehicle. One of the things that Professor Han from PKU told us when he came here is, you don't want to just design a vehicle, you want to design it in a way that's never been done. So scrap everything that's just taken from a conventional car and design it just for this purpose, and don't try and adapt it from any other purpose. Based on that, we've been looking at reducing, instead of taking a car that was once internal combustion and trying to shift it over to being electric, we're designing it from the ground up to be electric. So things like getting rid of radiators and the openings in your grille that are no longer really necessary, that also create more drag. Researching specific battery chemistries. Safety is a big aspect, because if this is going to be a nationally implemented system, obviously it needs to be safe and still meet the performance goals that we set for the project. So in order for this to become basically a globally implemented system, we've been looking at different ways, different things that we can add in to make it more effective. Things like having it Wi-Fi enabled, letting you work in the car wherever you go. Embedded screens, having something almost like a Siri or Cortana in the car, so you'd be able to plan your day as you're moving. So you're not just sitting in the car wasting time. You can do pretty much anything you would do in your office or home, you could do while you're in the car. And one of the things we were told to focus on is the atmosphere of the car. Is it going to be you're sitting in a more social environment? Is it individual seats? Is it more of a couch arrangement? Things like that. How does the seating arrangement work? We want to stray away from the typical 4-seat. One of the aspects we were told to focus on was the ditching the 4-seat, 5-seat car. When you have one person driving it, you tend to lose all that efficiency because you have one person driving this car that would fit 5. So making the car much smaller and much more focused on having a social atmosphere in that car would increase the amount of people and the smallness of the vehicle, and being able to have more of these vehicles in a train in a given space. So in order to call the vehicle, this is also dependent on the business model, but assuming that we end up going with either a corporately owned or a government-owned system, we would use an app similar to Uber or Lyft, where you could call the vehicle to where you are, and from there type in your destination and go. That's, I think, something that Jessica's been working on as well. And then modularity was a big deal for us, because we wanted, if something breaks in the vehicle, we wanted to be able to pull it out and replace it quickly. So when we looked at motors, we looked at hub motors and having 4-wheel drive, so that the entire unit is just a one-piece unit. If one fails, you can quickly detach it and attach a new one at the maintenance center, so that we don't have a lot of downtime on the vehicles.
So for domestic infrastructure, one of the things that we want the car to do, or the vehicle to do, is for you to be able to call it or to drop you off wherever you want. So when it drops you off, the car will go into a autonomous valet parking system, where you'll be able to interact with the car on the app to have it park in specific places, or if it needs to charge, it will go and charge, preferably at centers where there would probably be induction charging or something like that. Yeah, so that workers won't have to physically plug the car in. We also want it to be able to know when it needs to be charged, because we don't want it to be just on the street and then get stuck in the middle and cause problems for everyone. The cars also have to be maintained for public transportation. So all public transportation, cars or the trains and taxis, buses, they have to be clean, they have to be maintained for damage, things like that. And so one way to solve that, or to help improve the situation, would to be to increase surveillance, or to enforce, rules. But this wouldn't really apply if you privately own the vehicle. It's more for public need. And for road system optimization, basically until 100% of vehicles like in the US are autonomous. We still need things like traffic lights, but once everything is autonomous, it'd be kind of nice if cars could just go without traffic lights, like maybe even like weave in between each other in intersections and things like that.
So part of the project was also to figure out the business model. So the main question is, who are we selling to? So as Jessica mentioned, there's a lot of different options. This could be some sort of public system that works like taxis or buses that you just call. But also in California, especially Orange County, car ownership and having your own vehicle is very important to a lot of people. So there's also the thought to be able to sell this as a package to different manufacturers. Say, BMW or Audi has a whole autonomous system that they can implement, basically put their own name on, or it's just one company and everyone basically has the same car. It can also be used as things for like company fleets. So a lot of vehicles, you're driving all around in between cities. So a company could say just buy 100 of these, which would all stay at different locations, which would make it easy because then you could take it from A to B, somebody else could take it on to another location, and so on. And then there's also the legality. So insurance is a really big industry in the United States right now. I think insurance premiums for automobiles in 2013 ran over $500 million just for the 1 year. And a lot of that depends on the individual driver. It depends on how old you are, your gender, how long you've been driving, how many miles you drive. But a lot of that actually goes away once you have autonomous cars. So if you no longer become the driver, there's no more monetary discriminations. Insurance rates go down a lot. But then you also have to ask the question of who's liable. If it's just a computer driving and you hit something else, is it your vehicle? If you own it, do you have to pay for someone else's damages? If it's a city-owned taxi service and they collide into each other, does it come out of taxpayer money? So there's a lot of details in the liability that needs to be figured out and that would need to be implemented over the next few years, and probably a lot of different taxations and things that have to go in for our public system. And then we also need to look at who can operate them. So as the laws stand right now, autonomous vehicles still need things like a steering wheel and an emergency stop button. I know Google, with their Google cars, really trying to push for no steering wheel, just be able to get in and have it take you from one place to another. But I think at this point, people are really too scared to sort of, let go and lose that manual control. And you also still need a license to be able to drive these vehicles. So we're hoping that with this completely autonomous system, you wouldn't really need a license. You could just get in and go places. And also make that part of the system so people who can't get a license, maybe disabled and are unable to drive, people who are blind, different types of things, could be able to use these cars every day without the hassle of having someone take them around. Professor Han also talked about a couple of different project assumptions. He asked us to sort of look at both the now and what would be 20 to 30 years from now. So if we're looking at the future, we get to think that some of these laws have been passed so that autonomous vehicles can be driven on the road, which is a lot of problems that we're seeing right now. That a lot of these autonomous are already really ubiquitous. As Jessica said, we still need things like traffic lights and stuff until all the vehicles can just drive themselves. But in terms of a manufacturing standpoint, it is nice that you don't have the liability of having a left-hand driver or right-hand driver car. The manufacturing becomes a lot easier, and say importing from different countries is a lot less of a hassle. But we also need to look at how do we actually build these vehicles to be completely autonomous. So on board we have a sort of suite of different electronic sensors. The first and I guess the best range would be LiDAR, which uses a set of spinning lasers to sort of detect the world around you and see up to I think about 600 or 800 meters at the greatest distance. So from that you can build a 3D model of where everything is, and it can see the path ahead of it in order to take. We'd also be using radar, as Alex mentioned, for vehicle training. I know a lot of car companies right now are using that on active cruise control, things like Mercedes-Benz, to be able to follow cars. I think even today up to a distance of about 6 feet at the minimum. They're also using infrared cameras, which is something we'd like to implement, which can see, I think, again, up to about 600 meters, and we should be able to detect things such as animals on the road, bicyclists, pedestrians, and be able to slow down and react much before you'd be coming up to that. We can also use stereo cameras. Jessica and I are going to talk about that a little bit later, but NVIDIA has a system right now that can actually recognize bicycles, other cars, determine the speeds of other vehicles moving around it, but also things like crosswalk signs and speed limits, and help control the car based on signals on the road. And then for closer systems, we'd be using ultrasonic sensors to sort of see, how far are you to the car next to you, the car behind you, if you're, say, parking or whatnot. And then GPS. So obviously the car needs to know where it is in the world. If it's trying to get from A to B, it needs to know where those points are and where it is in between. So we use that for the navigational purposes.
So for the control program, there's two things that have to be taken into consideration. One is the vehicle to infrastructure, and the other is the vehicle to vehicle. So for the vehicle to infrastructure, it'll be doing basically what we're doing with our MATLAB code, which is just planning the paths for the vehicles. And the vehicles are planning the paths and making the vehicle trains, and the vehicles will also be sending back like the traffic data the same way that like Google does their traffic right now, just so the infrastructures can know like where the traffic is and hopefully like get other cars around it. For vehicle to vehicle, the vehicles have to know like what's around them. They're probably going to be communicating and like knowing when the vehicle in front of it will stop, especially like for like vehicle trains when you have such little distance in between. That's pretty important. An issue though is cybersecurity. So one way to combat it would be for like a manual shutdown button. Another would be encrypted data. I think we were looking at it though, and like right now cars can be hacked too, the same way that these cars can be hacked, but no one does it. So it's not like a huge issue right now. Yeah. For the power that it would take to do all of this, currently right now the Google autonomous car reads their data at 750 megabits per second. This is a lot. But as technology increases and improves, I guess there'd be means to do this. Can I talk about the NVIDIA?
Yeah, so I went over that a little bit before. So that whole integrated system is actually available right now. I think it's the DrivePX system. So that's actually using a lot of a normal computer and has a dedicated GPU to be able to take info in from the stereo cameras as well as from a suite of other electronic sensors. So it has built-in image processing and actually really works quite well.
So, as mentioned before, we talked about the infrastructures, or data centers as we call them. We can't have just one data center for the whole US. We'd have to split them up because it's too much power for one. So the distance and the amount that we will need depends on like density, the population density, and for estimate, we'd probably need one for every major city like LA, San Francisco, places like that. One for like every major tourist attraction because a lot of people will be going in and out. And for the more like rural areas, they could probably share data centers. Yeah. And so we ran into the issue of like what will happen when a vehicle moves in and out of data centers, like how would we be able to get the same information? And the solution would be to have each vehicle have like a unique fingerprint. And so every time a data center gives them a path to take, they'll have the data like fingerprinted onto the car. So when the vehicle train goes out into another data center circle, it will send it back to that new data center, so the data center will know what's going on with this car, and it'll be able to guide it to wherever it's going. And so for cost, the data cost probably for this car would be probably about $50 a month, which I think is like the price of a cell phone bill. And people might wonder why you'd want to pay for this, but when you're paying for the convenience of it, the extra equipment costs for all the sensors and stuff.
You guys are over time, so I'm just going to ask you guys
This is
that.
the last slide.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't seem reasonable to have it more than $5,000 per vehicle, and the maintenance cost for public vehicles might be from $200 to $1,700 per week per vehicle. So yeah.
That it?
Yeah.